Let your mind drift, as though carried by the Nile itself. The river that has always been the heart of Egypt. Feel the hush of water flowing under moonlight, cool and eternal, while beyond the banks the desert lies silent, its sands whispering secrets of ages long past. Together we will return, far, far back, before the pyramids, before the pharaohs, to the earliest stirrings of human life here, along this miraculous river. In the deep prehistory of Egypt, the desert was not yet barren. Millennia ago, the Sahara was green, dotted with lakes and savannas where giraffes, elephants, and crocodiles roamed freely. Hunters painted animals upon stone shelters, their hands pressed against the rock, leaving echoes for us to find. Slowly, as the climate shifted and the land grew drier, people moved closer to the Nile. It was there, beside its life-giving waters, that they began to plant seeds in the dark, fertile soil left by the annual floods. Barley and wheat, flax and lentils, little fields shimmering in the morning sun. And so, quietly, agriculture was born, and with it, the rhythm of Egyptian life. The Nile was more than water, was the pulse of existence. Each year, when the rains fell far away in the Ethiopian highlands, the river would swell and flood the fields. To the people, this was not chance, it was blessing, a sacred breath of the gods themselves. They measured their lives by its rising and receding, planting when the waters withdrew, harvesting when the golden crops swayed under the sky, waiting again when the land grew dry and cracked. Out of this cycle came not only food, but faith, a deep trust in the order of the world. And with the Nile's blessings came gathering villages, then chiefdoms, then small kingdoms. In Upper Egypt, along the narrow southern valley, and in Lower Egypt, in the wide northern delta, two worlds developed side by side. Fishermen along the marshes, potters shaping vessels with steady hands, women weaving baskets tight enough to carry grain, hunters still stalking gazelle in the thinning green belts. And slowly, their beliefs took shape: spirits of the river, gods of the sky, protectors of the dead. Among the earliest names we know is that of a king, Narmer, or perhaps Menes, who around 3100 BCE is said to have united Upper and Lower Egypt into one. On a small ceremonial pallet carved of stone, we see him crowned, smiting his foes, watched by the falcon god Horus. Whether legend or fact, this unification gave birth to the first dynasty. And thus began the story of ancient Egypt's kingdoms and unfolding of time unlike any other. Imagine the world, then. Small towns clustered beside canals, reed huts rising from the mud, cattle wandering the pastures. And above them, the first great symbols of kingship. The pharaoh was not merely a ruler, he was divine, a living Horus, embodying the gods on earth. Every ritual, every temple, every grain of offering was tied to him, for he alone held the balance of Math, the order of the universe. Without Mat, chaos threatened. With it, the Nile would flow, the sun would rise, and the people would live. The earliest dynasties built their tombs not as pyramids yet, but as mastabas, flat, rectangular structures of mud brick. Inside, offerings were left beer jars, bread, carved figurines, gifts to sustain the soul in the afterlife. The Egyptians believed deeply in this eternal journey. Death was not an end, but a passage. The body had to be preserved, the name remembered, so that the soul could live forever in the field of reeds, where rivers flowed and fields were always ripe for harvest. From these beginnings rose the Old Kingdom, an age of breathtaking ambition. By the time of Pharaoh Djoser, around 2650 BCE, the vision of eternity had reached new heights. His architect, Imhotep, designed something never seen before: the step pyramid at Saqqara. Layer upon layer of stone, rising toward the heavens, a stairway for the king's soul to ascend. Imhotep himself would be remembered for millennia, worshipped as a god of wisdom and healing. The pyramids that followed were even grander, each block of limestone hauled with human strength and ingenuity. The Great Pyramid of Khufu, towering upon the Giza Plateau, aligned with stars, measured with uncanny precision, became a monument that still humbles us today. Inside, narrow passageways led to chambers where the pharaoh's body lay surrounded by treasures. Outside, hundreds of workers, farmers, during flood season, labored together, not as slaves, but as citizens fulfilling their duty, fed with bread and beer, singing under the sun. By torchlight, priests performed rituals, chanting hymns, burning incense so fragrant it curled into the air like whispers to the gods. Nearby, scribes bent over rolls of papyrus, recording offerings, decrees, and prayers in the delicate lines of hieroglyphs. Tiny birds, eyes, rivers, and reeds flowing like art across the surface. And in these symbols, Egypt preserved its voice, a language of beauty and permanence. In the Old Kingdom, the pharaoh was the center of all. But also, life flourished beyond palaces. Artisans carved statues so lifelike that they seemed ready to breathe. Farmers tended orchards of sycamore figs, date palms heavy with fruit. Musicians played harps and flutes, while dancers swayed in celebration of harvests. Children splashed in the Nile's cool waters. And through it all, the desert watched silently, encircling the land like an ocean of sand. It was an age of confidence, of grandeur, yet fragile too. For when famine struck, when the Nile failed to flood as high, when central power weakened, the Old Kingdom fell into decline. Namark's local governors rose in power, and Egypt entered an age of uncertainty. But even in hardship, the people did not lose faith in their gods, nor in the eternal rhythm of the Nile. And so, through drought and renewal, Egypt moved into the Middle Kingdom. The Nile still flowed, steady and eternal, even when kings faltered. After the fall of the Old Kingdom, Egypt entered what historians call the First Intermediate Period. For the people, it was a time when unity seemed lost. Local governors ruled their provinces with increasing independence. Cities grew apart, and rival dynasties claimed the throne. Yet in these quieter centuries, poetry and lamentations flourishes of despair, but also of hope. Scribes wrote of the hardships of famine, of people wandering, hungry, of justice and injustice weighed against each other. And from this turmoil, a new vision of kingship emerged, one not only divine, but also shepherd-like, caring for the people as much as ruling them. This softer idea gave birth to the Middle Kingdom, beginning around 2050 BCE, with the reign of Mentuhotep II. He reunited Egypt, bringing Upper and Lower once again under a single crown. His mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahari, set against steep cliffs of honey-colored stone, was unlike anything before half-temple, half-monument, filled with colonnades and terraces where incense would rise in curling streams. Standing there, one could feel the blend of earth and heaven, stone and sky, power and devotion. The Middle Kingdom was an age of balance. Pharaohs strengthened irrigation systems, carving canals, reclaiming marshlands, and building dikes so that the Nile's blessings could be shared more widely. In the fields, farmers tended barley, emmer, wheat, onions, and garlic. In workshops, artisans shaped delicate jewelry of gold and carnelian, their hands steady under the dim glow of oil lamps. And in this age, literature blossomed. Stories like the tale of Sinaha, tale of exile and return, of longing for home, were copied again and again by student scribes. Wisdom texts offered guidance, how to live honorably, how to treat others with fairness, how to balance duty with kindness. These words, written thousands of years ago, still whisper across time, teaching us that even in an ancient kingdom of stone and sand, people pondered love, loss, loyalty, and fate. Religion, too, grew more intimate. In the Old Kingdom, the afterlife had been almost the sole domain of the pharaoh, but in the Middle Kingdom, common people began to believe they, too, might join the blessed dead. Coffins bore spells to protect souls, guiding them through the perils of the underworld. Gods, like Osiris, Lord of the afterlife, grew ever more central, offering hope beyond death to all. Yet, even this golden balance could not last forever. Egypt entered another decline, known as the Second Intermediate Period, when foreign rulers, the Hyksos, likely from the Levants, settled in the delta. They brought with them new inventions: the horse-drawn chariot, the composite bow, new bronze weapons. Though they ruled part of the land, Egypt absorbed their technologies, learning and adapting. And soon a new dynasty rose in Thebes, determined to expel the Hyksos and restore Egypt's greatness. When the Hyksos were driven out around 1550 BCE, the new kingdom was born. It was an era dazzling in its power and brilliance, its empire age, stretching influence beyond its deserts into Nubia, the Levant, and far-off lands. The Theban kings built colossal temples and statues that still take our breath away, their reigns recorded in vivid hieroglyphs carved deep into stone. One of the most remarkable figures of this era was a woman, Hatshepsut. She reigned not as queen consort, not hidden in the shadow of a husband, but as Pharaoh herself. To cement her authority, she wore the false beard, dressed in kingly regalia, and inscribed her name boldly upon temple walls. She embarked on ambitious trade expeditions, most famously to the land of Punt, from which ships returned laden with incense, trees, gold, and exotic animals. At Deir el-Bahari, her mortuary temple rose in terraces of luminous stone, its reliefs depicting the voyage. Its walls filled with offerings to Amen, the great god of Thebes. Even centuries later, her reign shines as one of peace, prosperity, and vision. Not long after, another pharaoh would shake Egypt with radical change, Akhenaten. Originally named Amenhotep IV, he turned his devotion solely to Aten, the sun disk, declaring that only this radiant god was true. He built a new capital at Akhenaten, today known as Amarna, filling it with sunlit temples open to the sky. Art shifted, too, no longer rigid and formal, but fluid, intimate, showing the royal family in tender embraces. Daughters playing on their parents' laps, the rays of Aten streaming down to bless them. With his queen, Nefertiti, Akhenaten sought to transform religion into something luminous and personal. But after his death, Egypt swiftly returned to its old ways. The boy king Tutankhamun, once named Tutankhaten, restored the worship of Amun and the traditional gods. His reign was brief, but his tomb, discovered thousands of years later, preserved a treasure trove: golden shrines, jeweled masks, chariots, and amulets resting undisturbed for millennia until modern eyes beheld their glow. Then came Ramesses II, called Ramesses the Great. His reign lasted 66 years, his monuments vast and many. At Abu Simbel, colossal statues of the king gaze out from the cliffs, 20 meters tall, as though guarding eternity. He fought great battles, including the famous clash at Kadesh against the Hittites. A battle so evenly matched, it ended not in conquest, but in one of history's earliest peace treaties. He fathered over 100 children, filled temples with his image, and carved his name upon stone, so insistently that later generations remembered him above nearly all others. In the new kingdom, Egypt thrived as never before. Priests at Karnak oversaw vast temple complexes, their columns painted with bright colors, their sanctuaries echoing with hymns. Festivals filled the streets, processions carrying statues of gods upon gilded boats, drums beating, incense clouding the air with sweetness. Wealth poured in from conquests abroad, from Nubia's gold mines, from trade routes that reached into distant lands. And yet, even empires fade. As power grew concentrated in the hands of the priesthood, and as enemies pressed at the borders, Egypt began to weaken. Libyan tribes moved into the delta, Nubians rose in the south, Assyrians marched with armies of iron. The glory of the new kingdom dimmed, and Egypt entered another long chapter of foreign rule and fragile independence. Still, through it all, the people of Egypt held fast to their traditions. The Nile kept flowing, farmers kept sowing and reaping, temples stood, weathering centuries their inscriptions, still calling on the gods for protection. Egypt, eternal in spirit, endured even when kings and conquerors changed. The fading glow of the new kingdom slipped gently into what is called the late period, a time when Egypt no longer commanded an empire abroad, but still held within it the pulse of ancient traditions. Imagine walking through a temple in these centuries, the walls carved deeply with hieroglyphs as though to make them eternal. The columns painted with lotus blooms, priests moving in procession with sistrums jingling, incense burning sweet and heavy in the air. Outwardly, it was the same Egypt of the gods and the Pharaoh. Yet, in truth, power was shifting. Foreigners came, one after another, and each left their mark upon the land. Libyans settled in the delta and rose to rule as dynasties, blending their customs with Egyptian ritual. Nubians from the south conquered and reigned as pharaohs. Their kings, proud, building pyramids of their own in the sands of Kush, keeping alive the flame of Egyptian culture even far beyond the first cataract. Later came the Assyrians, their armies fierce and ironclad, pressing down from Mesopotamia. Then the Persians, folding Egypt into their vast empire, treating it as one jewel among many. Yet, through all these invasions, the Egyptian spirit endured. The gods still received offerings. Farmers still sowed with the flood. The language of hieroglyphs still graced the walls, whispering of order and eternity. In this late period, knowledge blossomed in quieter ways. Temples became centers of learning, where priests studied astronomy, medicine, and mathematics. They tracked the stars across the heavens, predicting the Nile's floods by careful observation. They recorded remedies: honey for wounds, willow bark for pain, knowledge passed on in papyri that echo faintly in modern medicine. And always, the balance of mat, the sense of cosmic order, guided their vision of life. But in 332 BCE, a new conqueror arrived, unlike any before. From the north, across deserts and mountains, came Alexander of Macedon, Alexander the Great. With him marched armies that had swept through Persia, toppling empires like reeds before the wind. When he entered Egypt, the people did not resist. They saw in him not just a conqueror, but a liberator from Persian rule. He was crowned as Pharaoh, acknowledged as son of Ammon, embraced as though he belonged to the timeless line of Egypt's kings. Alexander's reign was brief. He would die young, far away in Babylon, but his presence changed Egypt forever. For in his wake came the Ptolemies, his Greek successors, who would rule for nearly 3 centuries. They founded a city, Alexandria, upon the Mediterranean shore, and it grew into one of the greatest cities of the ancient world. Imagine its shining harbors, filled with ships from every land, its streets broad and colonnaded, its palaces gleaming white against the sea. At Alexandria rose the great library, a wonder of learning, where scrolls from across the known world were gathered, texts from Greece, Babylon, India, and beyond. Scholars studied under its vaulted halls, whispering of mathematics, astronomy, medicine, philosophy. It was said that ships docking at Alexandria were required to surrender their scrolls so that copies could be made for the library, ensuring that all knowledge touched by the sea might be gathered there. Though much of it has long since vanished, the idea of that library remains like a dream of infinite wisdom. And upon the shore stood the lighthouse of Pharaohs, guiding sailors safely into harbor, its light shining for miles across the waters. Built in stone, towering above the waves, it was counted among the 7 wonders of the world. Travelers approaching by sea would see its beacon long before they saw the city itself, a symbol of human ingenuity and ambition. The Ptolemies, though Greek by blood, embraced much of Egyptian tradition. They wore the crowns of the pharaohs, offered sacrifices to the gods, and had their names carved in hieroglyphs upon temple walls. Yet their court spoke Greek. Their culture woven from 2 threads, Hellenic and Egyptian, entwining into something new. Statues of gods bore features blending the styles of both worlds. Serapis, a deity created by the Ptolemies, combined aspects of Greek and Egyptian divinity, meant to unite their subjects under shared worship, and then, into this world of mingled cultures, there emerged a queen whose name still lingers like perfume upon history. Cleopatra the 7th, the last of the Ptolemies. She was intelligent, learned, fluent in many tongues, including Egyptian, a rarity among her dynasty. She was not only beautiful, as legend claims, but witty, politically astute, and determined to keep Egypt independent amid the growing power of Rome. Cleopatra's reign was a delicate dance with destiny. She allied first with Julius Caesar, sailing to meet him hidden within a rolled carpet, a gesture as bold as it was dramatic. Together, they secured her throne. Later, she joined with Mark Antony, their partnership, both political and deeply personal, a love story entangled with empire. But against them stood Octavian, who would become Rome's first emperor. At the Battle of Actium, Cleopatra and Antony's fleet was defeated, and the fate of Egypt was sealed. In 30 BCE, with Antony fallen and Octavian at her gates, Cleopatra chose her end. According to tradition, she held an aspa, venomous snake, to her breast, embracing death rather than humiliation. With her passing, 3,000 years of pharaonic rule ended, and Egypt became a province of Rome. The Ptolemaic dynasty was gone, but Cleopatra's memory lingered, eternal as the Nile. Under Rome, Egypt changed again. The pharaohs were gone, but the land remained the empire's breadbasket, its fertile fields feeding legions far away. Roman emperors adorned temples with their images in pharaonic style, presenting themselves as heirs of the old gods, even as Latin spread and Roman legions marched. Alexandria continued to thrive, a city of commerce, scholarship, and diverse peoples. Christianity, too, began to spread, whispered in gatherings, carried along trade routes, taking root in the desert monasteries where monks sought solitude and prayer. The ancient gods, once so eternal, slowly dimmed. Temples grew quiet, their sanctuaries abandoned, hieroglyphs carved less and less, until in time the knowledge of reading them was lost entirely. The old ways faded, and a new faith spread across the land. And still the Nile flowed, as it always had. The same waters that fed the earliest fields, that mirrored the pyramids in their prime, that bore Cleopatra's ships and Caesar's galleys, flowed on, endless and serene. Egypt endured, changing but never vanishing, always a bridge between worlds, between deserts and seas, between the ancient and the eternal. Under Rome, Egypt's role was clear. It was the empire's breadbasket, the fertile Nile Valley feeding cities and legions far away. Each year, great ships sailed from Alexandria, their holds heavy with grain, bound for Rome. Without Egyptian harvests, the capital of the empire would starve. Thus, Egypt, though conquered, remained indispensable, its soil sustaining one of history's mightiest powers. In Alexandria, life bustled with vigor. The city's great harbor was filled with vessels from across the Mediterranean. Sleek Roman triremes, merchant ships from Syria and Greece, traders from Nubia and Arabia. Markets overflowed with spices, glass, papyrus, fine linens, and gold jewelry hammered by skilled Egyptian artisans. The streets echoed with many tongues: Greek, Coptic, Latin, Hebrew, Aramaic, blending together in a cosmopolitan chorus. Though Rome ruled, echoes of the old Egypt lingered. Temples to Isis and Serapis still drew worshippers, their incense curling into the skies. Yet slowly, steadily, a new faith grew: Christianity. By the 2nd and 3rd centuries CE, Christian communities flourished in Egypt, often facing persecution, yet always persevering. The desert became a refuge for seekers of solitude and devotion, monks withdrawing into caves, building the earliest monasteries, crafting a tradition of contemplation that still shapes spiritual life today. In time, Christianity became dominant. Ancient temples were abandoned, their sacred halls quiet, their walls fading beneath sand and sun. The great library of Alexandria, already diminished by centuries of neglect and accidents, finally vanished into legend, its scrolls scattered or lost. The ancient gods who had watched over Egypt for 3 millennia fell silent, their names remembered only as whispers carved in stone. As Rome itself weakened, Egypt entered new hands. The Byzantine Empire, the eastern continuation of Rome, held the land, making Alexandria a stronghold of trade and theology. But the Byzantines, heavy with taxation and rigid in authority, often clashed with local Egyptians who followed their own Christian traditions, speaking the Coptic tongue, preserving their unique identity even under foreign rulers. Then, in the 7th century, a new chapter unfolded. From the Arabian Peninsula came Islam, carried by swift-moving armies and devout believers. In 641 CE, the Arab general Amr ibn al-As entered Egypt, and with little resistance, the land became part of the Islamic world. The Byzantine garrisons withdrew, and a new era began. The new rulers built a city, Fustat, near where Cairo now stands. It was not Alexandria, with its Greek columns and Mediterranean harbors. It was something different, something vibrant, rooted in the rhythms of the desert and the Nile. From here, Islam spread through Egypt, weaving itself into the fabric of daily life. Mosques rose with slender minarets, their calls to prayer floating over the river. Arabic slowly replaced Greek and Coptic as the language of administration, then of literature, then of the people. Cairo itself grew later, in 969 CE, founded by the Fatimids, who named it Al-Kriya, the victorious. And victorious, it seemed. The city swelled with scholars, artisans, traders, and pilgrims. Markets brimmed with silks from the East, spices from India, ivory from Africa. Lanterns glowed along its winding streets, their brass frames pierced with tiny patterns, casting star-like shadows on the walls. Egypt under Islam became a crossroads of the world. Knowledge thrived here. Physicians studying anatomy and remedies. Astronomers charting the heavens from observatories. Mathematicians exploring numbers and geometry. The great mosque university of Al-Azhar was founded, and to this day it stands as a beacon of Islamic learning. One of the oldest continuously operating universities in the world. Imagine its courtyards filled with students, seated cross-legged with their teachers, copying texts by hand, debating quietly. Architecture, too, flourished. The mosques of Cairo rose with domes and arches, calligraphy flowing across their walls like rivers of script. The mosque of Ibn Tulun, vast and serene, spread its open courtyard beneath the sun. Later, the Mamluk slave soldiers who rose to power and became sultans adorned the city with soaring minarets and madrasas. Cairo became known as the city of 1,000 minarets, its skyline bristling with spires, calling the faithful to prayer. In these centuries, Egypt was not merely a province, but a center of power. The Fatimids made it their capital, ruling from North Africa to the Levant. The Ayyubids followed under Salah ad-Din Saladinhu, defended the land against crusaders, building the great citadel of Cairo upon a rocky hill. From its walls, one could see the whole city below, the Nile gleaming in the distance, the desert stretching beyond. And then the Mamluks, fierce warriors turned rulers, who governed Egypt for centuries with both might and splendor. Their reign saw Cairo flourish as a hub of trade. Caravans arriving with silk, slaves, spices, sugar, gold, and gems. Scholars, poets, and craftsmen thrived under their patronage. The city grew so luminous, so wealthy, that travelers called it one of the jewels of the world. Yet even this golden age faced storms. The Mongols swept across Asia, but at Ain Jalut in 1260, the Mamluks of Egypt stood firm, halting their advance. The first real defeat the Mongols suffered. Egypt's armies, disciplined and fierce, preserved not only their land, but the Islamic world beyond. For a time, Cairo shone brighter still, its power unmatched. But centuries pass, and power shifts. In 1517, the Ottomans came, and Egypt fell beneath their empire. Though ruled from distant Istanbul, Egypt remained rich in culture, its people resilient, its traditions deep-rooted. Cairo remained alive, with scholars, merchants, and artisans, even as new empires rose elsewhere. Through Roman and Byzantine rule, through Arab conquest and Mamluk splendor, Egypt's essence never vanished. Always the Nile flowed. Always markets filled with voices. Always minarets and temples, columns and domes rose against the sky. The forms changed, but the spirit remained, like a steady rhythm beneath the noise of history. And so Egypt moved quietly into the modern age. The 16th century unfolded beneath new banners. For in 1517, the Ottomans swept into Egypt, defeating the proud Mamluks and bringing the land under the vast empire of the sultans in Istanbul. Though Egypt was now but a province, it remained luminous, its Nile Valley rich and essential. The Ottomans ruled through governors, yet often the Mamluks, though defeated, lingered in power behind the scenes, their influence woven into the life of Cairo. It was a land of two authorities, sometimes clashing, sometimes entwined. Cairo, under Ottoman rule, did not lose its brilliance. Minarets still pierced the sky, markets still hummed with trade. Carpets from Anatolia, coffee from Yemen, spices from Indiol flowed through its bazaars. The city remained a meeting point between Africa, the Mediterranean, and the East, its streets alive with call to prayer, clatter of donkeys, murmur of scholars in Al-Azhar's courtyards. Yet Egypt was no longer a great empire. It was a jewel in another's crown. Centuries passed this way, until, at the dawn of the 19th century, a new figure arrived from across the sea, Napoleon Bonaparte. In 1798, his French armies invaded Egypt, marching beneath blazing banners, their muskets and cannon shocking the desert with thunder. At the Battle of the Pyramids, Napoleon's troops, though far fewer, triumphed over the Mamluks, their squares of infantry holding against the thunder of cavalry. Napoleon's stay was brief, yet it left deep marks. With him came not only soldiers, but scholars, engineers, artists, linguists who studied Egypt with wonder. They copied hieroglyphs, measured temples, sketched pyramids beneath the hot sun. It was during this expedition that the Rosetta Stone was discovered, the key that centuries later would unlock the long silent language of the Pharaohs. Though Napoleon soon withdrew, chased by the British, the door to Egyptology had opened, and the fascination of the world with Egypt's ancient past had truly begun. In the power vacuum that followed, a man of ambition rose, Muhammad Ali, an Albanian officer who came with the Ottoman armies but seized control for himself. By 1805, he was governor in name, but ruler in truth. Muhammad Ali reshaped Egypt, modernizing its army, its agriculture, its economy. He introduced new crops, like cotton, which would become Egypt's white gold, spreading across fields in endless rows. He founded schools, sent students abroad, sought to lift Egypt into a new age of strength. His dynasty would rule for generations, leaving deep imprints on the land. In the mid-19th century came one of Egypt's most transformative projects, the Suez Canal, carved through desert sands. Linking the Mediterranean to the Red Sea, it opened in 1869 with grand ceremonies. Fireworks over port set music drifting across the water. The canal became the lifeline of world trade, shortening journeys between Europe and Asia, making Egypt once more the crossroads of empires. Yet it also deepened foreign interests in the land, for whoever controlled Egypt controlled the canal. By the late 1800s, Britain had moved to dominate Egypt, ostensibly to protect the canal, but in truth to wield its power over this vital passage. Though still officially under Ottoman sovereignty, Egypt was effectively ruled from London, its cotton fueling British mills, its canal serving British ships. Cairo and Alexandria saw railways, telegraphs, modern schools, but also foreign officers and advisors, steering Egypt's destiny away from its own people. Still, voices of independence stirred. Writers, poets, and nationalists dreamed of Egypt free again, its people ruling themselves. After the First World War, protests swelled in the streets, students and workers demanding sovereignty. At last, in 1922, Egypt declared independence, though British influence lingered still. A kingdom was proclaimed, palaces rose, but the struggle for full freedom was not yet over. In the mid-20th century, winds of change grew stronger. In 1952, the Free Officers Movement, led by young army men, including Gamal Abdel Nasser, swept away the monarchy. The king departed, and Egypt became a republic, its people claiming the nation for themselves. Nasser became its voice, charismatic, powerful, speaking of Arab unity, independence, pride. He nationalized the Suez Canal in 1956, defying Britain, France, and Israel, who struck back in the Suez Crisis. Yet, though bombs fell, Nasser stood unbroken, and Egypt emerged more determined, its canal now truly its own. The decades that followed were filled with triumphs and trials. Wars with Israel reshaped the region, bringing loss in 1967, but also the crossing of the Suez in 1973. When Egyptian soldiers stormed across the canal during Ramadan, regaining honor and land. Anwar Sadat, Nasser's successor, would later sign peace with Israel, returning the Sinai, but also shocking the Arab world. In 1981, he was struck down by assassins, and Hosni Mubarak took his place, ruling for nearly 30 years. Through these years, Cairo swelled into a metropolis of millions, its traffic ceaseless, its streets alive with vendors selling tea, falafel, mango juice. Alongside skyscrapers rose minarets centuries old. The modern city forever entwined with its ancient soul. Tourists flocked to the pyramids, to Luxor, to Aswan, their footsteps echoing in tombs where paint still glowed upon the walls. Archaeologists uncovered mummies, temples, forgotten statues, each discovery another whisper from the deep past. And in 2011, the people once again raised their voices. In Tahrir Square, under banners and chants, millions called for change, for freedom, for a new beginning. The revolution swept Mubarak from power, and Egypt entered yet another chapter, turbulent, uncertain, yet alive with possibility. Today, Egypt stands as a bridge between eras, between worlds. It is modern and ancient, bustling with highways, internet, and skyscrapers, yet also home to temples where jackal-headed Anubis still gazes from stone, where lotus flowers bloom along the Nile as they did in the days of Tutankhamun. The pyramids still rise, their edges softened by time, but their presence unbroken. Feluccas, small wooden boats, still drift upon the river under white sails, just as they did millennia ago. And the Nile, eternal, still flows northward, past fields of green and cities of stone, carrying with it all the memories of a civilization that has never truly ended. Egypt remains a land of wonder, of resilience, of eternal rhythm, a place where the past whispers in every breeze of the desert, and the future stirs in every crowded street of Cairo. From the first hunters who painted animals upon rocks, to the builders of pyramids, to the founders of cities, to the dreamers of independence, the story of Egypt flows on, as unending as the river that gave it life. Even in today's Egypt, that same hush can be found when the wind softens, when the water laps gently against the banks. Farmers rest after long days in the fields. Students whisper beneath lamps. And the sound of the river carries through Cairo and Aswan as it once carried through Memphis and Thebes. History is not gone. Here it lingers like perfume in the air. When we think of Egypt, we often picture the monumental, the pyramids, colossal statues, obelisks rising like frozen sunbeams. But life always was also lived in the quiet details. In ancient times, homes of mud, brick clustered along the riverbanks, shaded by reeds and palm trees. Families cooked bread in clay ovens, grinding wheat into flour with heavy stone corns. They drank beer brewed from barley, rich and thick, flavored sometimes with herbs. Children played with dolls of wood and clay, or little carved animals with wheels, pulled by cords of flax. Women adorned themselves with kohl, dark lines that shaded the eyes, not only for beauty, but to shield against the sun. Perfume, pressed from lotus flowers, or blended with resinous oils, was dabbed upon the skin, fragrant offerings to the gods of beauty and love. Language, too, shaped daily rhythm. The Egyptian tongue, spoken for millennia, flowed through hieroglyphs carved into temple walls. Through the cursive rush of hieratic and demotic scripts written upon papyrus. Words carried weight, for to speak a name was to keep it alive. That is why tombs bear inscriptions repeating the identities of the dead, asking passers-by to whisper them so that the departed might live forever in memory. And in a way, those whispers continue today, for we still speak the names Ramses, Nefertiti, Tutankhamun, breathing them into the present. Music drifted through every age. Harps of wood and gut strings sang beneath palace ceilings. Flutes and oboes, carved of reed, played hymns to Hathor, goddess of music and joy. Later, under Islamic rule, the oud and qanan filled the air, their melodies weaving through Cairo's night markets. Even today, Egypt's music pulses from cafes, taxis, wedding halls, sometimes modern pop, sometimes old love songs, sometimes the hypnotic beat of drums recalling dances as ancient as the desert itself. Food, too, connects the millennia. Bread has never left the Egyptian table. Its flat rounds, baked daily in ovens that glow red against the night. Beans and lentils, onions and garlic, cucumbers and datesall have filled the bowls of farmers, kings, and scholars alike. In the Pharaonic age, figs and honey sweetened the meals of nobles. In medieval Cairo, bustling markets sold roasted meats, saffron rice, pickled lemons. Today, falafel and full-mashed fava beans, seasoned with cumin and olive oil remain staples, eaten by dawn's first light, or at midnight beneath neon signs. Even in the smallest bite, history endures. Spirituality flowed alongside life like the Nile itself. For the ancients, the gods were everywhere, in the blazing sun, Osiris in the fertile earth, Isis in the rivers, nurturing waters. Temples rose not only as places of worship, but as homes for the gods. Each morning ritual carefully performed. Statues washed, dressed, offered food, incense curling toward painted ceilings. Later, Christianity blossomed, the Coptic faith preserving ancient traditions in hymns and liturgy. Churches stood where once temples had been, their crosses rising where obelisks had pointed skyward. Then Islam came, and Cairo grew rich with mosques, domes glimmering in sunlight, calligraphy flowing across stone like divine poetry. Through it all, Egypt embraced, absorbed, and transformed, its spirituality never erased, only renewed. What is overlooked often is the continuity, the way old echoes live within the new. The festival of Shem el-Nessim, celebrated every spring, predates both Christianity and Islam, stretching back to Pharaonic times when it marked renewal and rebirth. Families still picnic by the Nile, eating salted fish and fresh greens, breathing the same air their ancestors did thousands of years ago. In gestures of daily kindness, in shared meals, in festivals of light and song, Egypt's ancient heart beats on. Cairo itself is a living palimpsest, layer upon layer of time. Beneath modern streets lie ruins of Fatimid palaces, beneath those lie stones of Roman walls, and deeper still, fragments of pharaonic villages. Walking through its avenues, one passes medieval gates Bab, Zuwaila, Bab al-Fuda stone arches where merchants once rode in with caravans. In Khan el-Khalili, the great bazaar, silver lanterns still gleam under low wooden beams, echoing centuries of trade. And across the Nile, Giza's pyramids rise, immense yet silent. Even the desert is not empty. Once, long ago, seas washed over what is now sand, leaving behind the bones of whales that rest today in Wadi el-Haiden. The Valley of the Whales, silent reminders of Earth's deep prehistory. In Siwa Oasis, springs bubble amid date palms, and traditions of language and custom remain unique. Berber roots preserved in a pocket of green amid endless dunes. In the south, Nubian villages paint their houses in colors as vivid as the Nile's sunsets, blues and pinks glowing against golden sand. Egypt today is more than its past, yet its past is never gone. In laboratories, mummies are scanned by machines, revealing illnesses, diets, even voices. In museums, papyri are unrolled, their ink still sharp, their words still carrying prayers across millennia. On satellite maps, archaeologists trace faint outlines of buried temples, new discoveries waiting just beneath the soil. And always, the people themselves carry forward the rhythm of the land farmers guiding water into canals. Fishermen casting nets, families gathering beneath balconies as laughter spills into warm nights. To close your eyes and think of Egypt is to hear both silence and noise. The silence of tombs deep underground. The noise of Cairo traffic echoing like a river of steel. It is to see eternity in stone, and yet feel the pulse of the present in every heartbeat of its people. It is to drift through time, weightless as the Nile drifts from south to north. Never stopping, never ending, always flowing onward. And so, as we let this dream stretch further, we understand Egypt is not merely a story of kings or battles, of monuments or revolutions. It is a story of continuity, of human life repeating yet changing, of mornings and evenings, of bread baked, songs sung, prayers whispered. Love carried from one generation to the next. The land remains. The river flows. The people endure. And history here is not past, it is present, eternal, alive. Let us drift back once more, not into grand events, but into the subtler rhythms that shaped Egyptian existence. Imagine yourself within an ancient scriptorium, deep in a temple where scribes sit cross-legged on woven mats. The light of oil lamps flickers against polished limestone walls, casting shadows of hieroglyphs freshly inked onto papyrus. Each character, each curl and bird and reed is made with steady hand, for writing was considered sacred. Spelling was not just communication, but magic. Words were believed to hold divine power, and to write them was to participate in creation itself. When scribes copied spells from the Book of the Dead, or catalogued taxes of grain, or recorded hymns for mourning rituals, they did so with reverence, whispering under their breath so that the words might settle properly into the world. Now drift to the market of a pharaonic town. The air is alive with sound, the bleating of goats, the laughter of children, the shouts of merchants displaying wares. Clay jars brim with honey and beer. Baskets overflow with onions and garlic. Fish glisten on mats beside drying figs. A woman tests the softness of linen, running it between her fingers, while a potter kneels by his wheel, shaping clay that spins, water dripping from his hands. The smell is rich and earthy: baked bread, roasting meat, incense smoldering from a shrine at the square's edge. even here, the gods are present. A small statue of Toret, the hippo goddess who protects mothers and children, sits beside a cellar of amulets, her round form smiling at all who pass. We might forget how everyday people lived, but their lives were filled with music, laughter, hardship, and love, just as ours are. Children raced barefoot down sandy lanes, splashing in the Nile shallows, shaping toys from clay. Mothers sang lullabies to cradle sleep, their words soft and old, perhaps the very first songs of the world. Fathers repaired nets, tilled fields, bartered for cattle. Life was fragile. Floods could be too low, bringing famine, or too high, destroying homes, but still they endured, year after year, trusting the rhythm of the river as one trusts the beating of the heart. And then the stars. Oh, the stars above Egypt were once the truest calendar. Priests climbed temple stairs at night, gazing at the heavens, noting the rising of Sirius, the star of Isis, whose appearance signaled the Nile flood. Entire systems of astronomy were born from such careful watching. They saw in the constellations the gods themselves. Horus soaring as a falcon across the Milky Way. Osiris walking in Orion's belt. Nut, goddess of the sky, stretching her starry body over the earth. For Egyptians, the heavens were not cold and distant. They were alive, a mirror of the divine world. Even today, when one lies on the sands of the Sahara and gazes upward, the stars seem impossibly bright, impossibly near, as though whispering the same truths they told priests thousands of years ago. Move now into medieval Cairo, the city of 1,000 minarets. The call to prayer drifts across the rooftops, echoing from one slender tower to another. Lanterns glow in courtyards, their glass colored in ruby and emerald hues. Scholars gather in madrasas, copying manuscripts, debating philosophy, measuring the stars with astrolabes. Perfumed smoke curls upward from braziers, filling the air with amber and myrrh. A caravan has just arrived through Bab al-Futa, its camels heavy with pepper, cinnamon, silk, and books from faraway lands. Cairo hums like a living organism, each alley buzzing with voices, each market a labyrinth of fabrics, spices, jewelry, and knowledge. To walk here was to feel at the center of the world. And yet, step outside the gates, and silence returns. The desert lies eternal, rolling waves of golden sand stretching to the horizon. The wind sweeps across dunes, carving new shapes with every gust, erasing footprints within moments. It is a place of solitude, of contemplation, where hermits and wanderers sought God, where caravans crossed under scorching sun, their shadows long upon the ground. At night, the desert is cold, but the stars blaze with diamond light, and the silence is so complete it feels like time itself has paused. To lie there, in that quiet, is to hear the pulse of eternity. Life in modern Egypt still bears the echo of all these times. Walk the streets of Cairo today, and you hear car horns, vendors shouting, radios playing. Yet above it all, The minarets still call, just as they did centuries ago. The pyramids still stand at the city's edge, vast and timeless, watching neon billboards flicker in the night. In villages by the Nile, children still play barefoot. Women still bake bread in clay ovens. Families still gather to eat lentils and rice, to drink tea sweetened with sugar. Life is different, yes, but also the same, a thread unbroken from the dawn of history until this very moment. In dreams, we might wander Egypt endlessly. We might sit beside an ancient farmer and share a crust of bread. We might join a medieval poet in reciting verses beneath a moonlit dome. We might walk through Cairo at dawn, hearing the city wake, smelling bread baking in street stalls, watching the first boats slip across the Nile. Egypt is eternal not only in its monuments, but in its sensations, the heat of the sun on skin, in the coolness of river water on feet, in the songs that rise with the morning air. And as the night deepens, as your breath slows, you may feel as though you too are drifting along that river, timeless, weightless, carried by centuries. The past is not gone. It lives here, in memory, in stone, in song, in you. And Egypt, land of endless history, cradles you gently, whispering stories that never end, rocking you into sleep as the Nile has rocked civilizations since the dawn of time.